Before you go out on the site, I want you to give some thought to a few things. What's really important is that you make sure that before you start your day, you've got safety on your mind. Because if you don't, you won't end the day safely. You won't go home safely.
When you think of safety in the workplace, it might sound just like a tagline, or it might sound like something a company's trying to tell you. But the reality is that when you go to work, you don't intend to not come home. Your family certainly expects you to come home. So when you get to your job and you think about your tasks throughout the course of your day, you have to think of it from that perspective.
It's not about just taking the steps to be safe, but it's also thinking constantly about how to not get hurt. So you have to constantly be thinking about safety and be thinking that you need to be taking steps to keep yourself safe and keep those that are working around you safe.
When accidents do happen and we conduct a thorough accident investigation, we very quickly come up with shoulda, coulda, woulda. If we instead change our focus, identify the hazards before you go out on the work site, and then recognize them once you've identified them. It requires some forethought. It requires talking to one another. Don't just go in there by yourself. You're a team. Think like a team and act like a team, and then everyone will be safe throughout the day.
So what is a hazard? A hazard is simply anything that has the potential to do harm or cause an incident. And that can be just about anything. For instance, on a job site, you could have moving equipment. You could have people working around you. The ground we walk on is a hazard. The air, if it's not healthy, is a hazard. Just about anything is a hazard.
Those hazards aren't always the big ones. Fall protection, trench safety, the common ones that everybody knows to pay attention. It's the little things that will get you, and if you pay attention to the little things, the big things become easy.
In every task that we do, and sometimes want to take a shortcut, but there's a voice in the back of your mind that usually says, you're about to do the wrong thing. And then you consciously make that decision of which way you want to go. Now, whether or not you want to go home at the end of the day, safely in the same way that you came in, I think that's a conscious decision you make.
If you're coming into this industry and you've never done this before, or you've come into this industry from a similar industry, you might not recognize a hazard that you had at another place, only because, one, you may have not been instructed about it. Two, your perception of the hazard is different. Take a step back. Look around. If you see something, say something. It might not be what you think is 100% a hazard, but may have a problem. Well, that is a hazard, and you need to tell somebody.
Whenever you start a new job or a new task on the job, the first thing you should do is a risk assessment. So basically, what here is going to hurt me or somebody else? As you're looking around at the task you have to do, you have to be able to identify what could potentially harm me, what could have the possibility of harming me, and you have to plan your work accordingly to avoid that.
A risk assessment is looking at any of the potential hazards that might be involved with the job. They change on a day-to-day basis. They change if weather conditions change. So it's important that they're done at minimum daily. Every time you return to work after a break or after lunch, it's good to reevaluate what new hazards might be present.
To assess the risk, we must always and continuously ask ourselves two simple questions. What hazards around me have the potential to cause an injury or an incident? And then what am I doing that has the potential to cause an incident?
When you're assessing risk, you can look at it from this perspective. Frequency, which is the amount of times that you're going to expose yourself or somebody else to that. Likelihood is actually the amount of whether it's likely that it could happen or unlikely it could happen. And severity is if it did happen, how severe would it be? You use those three categories when you're assessing risk to determine whether you need the right PPE, whether you need to re-engineer, whether you can do it altogether or you should avoid it completely.
As you're identifying the hazards for whatever work you've been assigned to do, make sure to prioritize them. Consider what are the high risk, medium risk, and low risk activities or exposures, and then deal with them each in their own way.
Something that could present a hazard but would be super unlikely would be lower priority. Something that presents a hazard that might be a smaller hazard but could frequently happen, like cutting your hand, would be a higher priority of something that you can avoid. And everything has a different priority level based off of what you're doing.
When I do a risk assessment, like say, take for example, we're gonna set steel that day. I not only look at the crane and the cable, and we have a short talk in the morning, make sure everybody's got all their tie-off equipment and all their necessary safety stuff, but I look beyond that. Do we know what's under the crane? Is the crane gonna go drive over something that's an unknown? Have we surveyed it? And it's not just the high-risk operations that need to get looked at. You're putting in pipe. Do you have the right shoring? Do you have the right equipment? Do you have an escape route? Do you have ladders? There's a lot to look at.
Traffic is a big hazard on a construction site like this. You'll be standing here just like this with 80,000-pound trucks whizzing right by you, and the only thing protecting you from that traffic would be the barrel.
It's not just safety, it's just the complete gamut of work ethic and professionalism. I think that's where you really develop a culture.
It can't be just me or a supervisor or a foreman telling them you need to do this to be safe. They need to recognize it themselves and do the right thing all the time.
I've been in the construction industry my entire life. I love what we do. I love the projects that we build. I find it exciting. But you wouldn't catch me out on bridge steel without being tied off. I know for sure that a person who's properly tied off can walk across a bridge beam faster than someone who's not. Safety and productivity go hand in hand. A safe workplace will provide you the confidence to do your job, to enjoy it as much as I do, to have the satisfaction of saying, wow, look at what we built. When you get home at night, you can talk to your family about it because you're not in the hospital.